Tonight on the first ever episode of the Vince Dao Show, I will be sharing the origin story of how I became the conservative personality I am today, my red pill moment, if you will. We will also be discussing the upcoming Trump-DeSantis drama, because that's not controversial at all and will make absolutely no one mad. And the left is attacking Lauren Boebert for, wait for it, having a family and being a grandmother. Did I write that down correctly? Yes, that is indeed what they are attacking her for. That's all coming up tonight on the Vince Dao Show. Stay tuned. And we are live tonight from the great state of Florida. Welcome to the Vince Dao Show. I am your host, Vince Dao. And before we begin, everyone be sure to leave a like and subscribe right now to the channel if you are new. We are going to be doing this show every night live at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. This is obviously sort of the debut of all of that. But before we begin and while we let people pour in, let me say hi to some of the chat here. So let's see. What's up, Chevy? We got Chevy in chat. Rebecca, Brian, French Toast, Crusader 21, Zachary, Lion Oz, Romans 58, and Revolutionary X. What's up, guys? Good to see all of you. And how many likes do we have right now? We got 38 likes. Let's get those numbers up, okay? I want to see at least 100 likes in the next like 20 or so minutes here. And let's get those numbers up. Everyone, leave a like on the stream right now, okay? Do it. Now, if you want to support the show and you want to guarantee that your comment or question is read, you could consider supporting by sending in a super chat. I will be checking for super chats and reading some chats periodically here in between all of our different segments. So I'm not going to pause every single moment to read every single chat, but I will do my best in between segments of the show to read the chats and make sure I get to all of you. So I promise, fingers crossed, all of your chats and comments will be read and all donations go to support the show. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Well, let's get started tonight, folks. Let's see, what time is it? Oh, it's Dao time. Should I make that a thing? I was thinking about it earlier. I was like, what if we start the show by looking at my watch and I say something like it's Dao time? Because it's not Miller time, it's Dow time. Am I right? Okay, anyways, let me know what you think of that. Well, I'll try to make it smoother in the future. But anyways, considering this is our very first show, I feel like it might be useful. And, I have a lot of different subscribers that came in from all these different places. I feel like it might be actually useful to start off by simply introducing myself. So, I'm Vince Dao. I'm a 19-year-old Christian conservative commentator, currently residing in the great state of Florida. And people are always like, you're not 19 years old. No way. You're they're like, what are you, 19? And I get comments like this all the time. So just to prove it to you, there is my high school ID. Okay, I'm not going to show any real IDs, obviously, but if you can look at that, class of 2021, grade 12. Okay, it's the camera's not focusing on it, but it is real. It is real. I'm 19 years old. And, you hear that story, 19-year-old kid doing conservative commentary for a while. He must have been raised in the traditional, homeschool baby, Republican lifestyle. And that's actually not the case. And this is where we get into my origin story and why it is, in many ways, quite interesting. I actually grew up in a secular, largely apolitical household in Los Angeles. Okay, that's where I'm actually from. I'm from LA. And though I've been a conservative since I was about 15 years old, I actually did have sort of a left-leaning phase when I was very young that I walked away from. And I figured for the purposes of you getting to know me and me getting to know you, it might be useful to tell that story. And maybe some of you guys will relate to that story, some of you not, but it is what it is. You guys deserve to know who I am before we start doing this show, and so let's do that, all right? And so to contextualize this, I went to public school in LA growing up. So I was not a private school kid, public school kid, and as you can imagine, that is very left-leaning. But what's interesting is that, and you might say, well, how does this make any sense? How are you even paying attention to politics at such a young age? Well, in many ways, you could say this. I was just kind of always destined to do it. And, that's honestly kind of true. But it's interesting because back in elementary school, so this is the early 2010s, late 2000s, I was actually kind of taught the old school Southern California concept of liberalism. And so that meant, treat everyone equally, love everyone, be tolerant. We're all individuals. We don't see skin color or gender or anything like that, because if you'll think back to like the late 1900s, that was still kind of the mentality for a lot of Californians. And, this is actually what I was taught in elementary school, right? When we were in elementary school, again, this is in Los Angeles, still as late as like 2008, 2009. We learned about MLK, but I didn't learn anything about how MLK was like actually a socialist and, would have supported BLM and all this stuff. I was just taught he said to be colorblind. That's what you ought to do. Treat everyone equally, all that stuff. And this is something at a very young age that I internalized in myself because it just seemed convincing. I mean, what could possibly be wrong or bad about just, treating everyone equally and free speech and all these kind of basic, like classically liberal tenets. And so that's who I was as a very young kid, or at least what I implicitly understood. But what's interesting is that when I got to middle school, I went to like a magnet middle school. So it was pretty left wing there. It was more political because it was like a higher studies type of thing. And that's where I started to encounter wokeism, right? I started to encounter feminism, BLM, all these things. This was around 2015 or so. I think I was in 7th grade. And keep in mind, in many ways, I was still holding to the values I was raised with. And I showed up to middle school having these old school Californian values, we love everyone, bro, right? You know what I'm saying? Oh, sorry, you can't see on the camera. That kind of just chill Californian mentality. And I started seeing this, and I was kind of confused by it. I started to wonder in many ways, like, what happened to liberalism? What happened to the kind of Californians I grew up around? And this was, again, 2015. So this is when the culture shift towards the hard left started to really, it was happening for a while, but where it started to really take root and really be apparent to everyone. And so, I looked at the 2016 era of feminists and SJWs and all that stuff. And immediately at a very young age, again, I was in 7th grade, I found those things to be ridiculous, You say you're a feminist, but you want to put women over men. It's not about equality. You BLM activists just want to hate all white people and cops. Again, very basic tier thoughts. I understand these are not like revolutionary opinions I'm giving you, but in 7th grade, these were the things that I started to notice. And as a liberal myself at the time, I actually found myself kind of confused. And now, as a conservative and as someone who's matured a lot ideologically and philosophically, of course, now I understand that, it really wasn't antithetical to liberalism. In many ways, leftism, wokeism, all these things are simply the end result of the slippery slope that is liberalism itself, right? And so now that I'm older, I understand that. But back then, I looked at this and I looked at like Bill Maher fighting with other leftists about, the Islam thing and that whole Sam Harris back in the day, and I was kind of confused by all of that. I clearly remember that my 7th grade history teacher, and this was world history. Okay, so, in world history, you're supposed to learn about world history. So there's all these different units. You're supposed to learn about China, Europe, Africa, the Middle East, North America, everything. My 7th grade history teacher spent the entire first semester and half of the second semester literally teaching us only about Islam. That was it. That was all she taught us about. And, keep in mind that this was around 2015. So this was when you had all the Islam nowadays is not as big of a culture war kind of debate. But back then you had all of these, Sharia, these Islamic terrorist attacks. It was this big cultural war issue. And so she literally told us she was going to forego the whole curriculum in 7th grade and teach us instead about Islam the entire time. So that way we would be like educated and not like fall into bigotry and all that stuff. These are the things that she said. Okay. Now, as a classical liberal, like I was at the time, I had a few different problems with this. First of all, it's like you're totally going off the rails to, teach your own curriculum here. All right. Before woke teachers were a thing identified nationally, I had one and I was like, what the heck is going on there? But I also saw things like, okay, fine, I'm a liberal, right? I respect all religions, but we should point out things like Sharia law, brutalizing women, denying human rights. These were my thoughts at the time. These things are prevalent in the Muslim world, and although liberals coddle the Islamic world so much, aren't many of these things actually like antithetical to liberalism? And so we would have these opinion blogs in class. We used to write out like, oh, write your opinion on this or that. And I very clearly remember that every time I dissented from her opinion on anything regarding Islam or the Islamic world, I would get a C-. It was the same exact grade every time. I get a C- every time. And then whenever I didn't dissent or didn't really have an opinion or whatever, it was A+ every single time. And so, like I said, 7th grade, I was already having my very first experience with woke teachers. Now, again, classical liberal Vince looked at this and was like, what the heck? Like, you're grading me down based on a disagreement of viewpoint? What does that have to do with free speech? What does that have to do? Where's the fairness in that, right? So needless to say, especially having this experience, from a very young age, I was already, again, 7th grade, disaffected with social justice, disaffected with wokeism, the social left, all of it. And so, a lot of people, their like walk away story from the left is like, I started to realize all these things were lies. I noticed all of these things were lies from the beginning. But in 2015, when the presidential primaries started to heat up, again, I was already pissed at the wokesters back in 2015. I was already unhappy with the feminist and the social left. I had to find a place to channel my discontentment. And I saw, obviously, that all the feminists and all the annoying woke people were going for Hillary, and I was immediately like, no, I do not like Hillary. I do not like her supporters. And that obviously put me at odds with most of the Californians around me, put me at odds with most of my middle school. So you're probably thinking that that was it. I immediately channeled my discontentment into Trump, but not actually at the beginning. You see, initially, I actually channeled like my anti-woke sort of populist energy into Bernie Sanders. Now, we may look at that in hindsight and say that was just stupid. Like, what do you mean? Bernie Sanders is the icon of the progressive left and all this stuff. And nowadays, that is obviously true. And you look at his 2020 campaign, he totally just caved into all the social left. But if you'll remember back in like 2016, Bernie Sanders did not really take the left side on culture war issues nearly as much as he does now. In fact, he often didn't really speak about those, and his whole appeal was more so of being like a working class populist. In many ways, he was actually to the right of Hillary Clinton on a lot of social issues. Obviously, the economic issues very far left, but I was too dumb to understand any of that, or I heard free college and thought, oh, free college. But on a lot of these social issues, if you'll remember the term Bernie bro, right? Remember the term Bernie, hey, you're a Bernie bro. The term Bernie bro actually came from Hillary Clinton supporters, right? It was Hillary Clinton supporters calling us Bernie bros because they said the coalition of Bernie is all like white men, right? So just to give you context of kind of who Bernie was back then and whatnot, they were saying Bernie Sanders supporters are not diverse enough, to which I was saying, well, what? Okay. Now, over the course of the primary, I watched, and you guys might remember this, I watched like Bernie Sanders basically get entirely screwed over, okay? Right? So I watched the DNC. I saw how corrupt that was. I saw how corrupt like the mainstream media was. I saw how corrupt obviously Hillary was. I literally thought she was like an evil witch, okay? And I was incredibly pissed back in 2015, 2016. I looked at Hillary Clinton and thought, this is like the most corrupt woman in the history of American politics. And she's insane. She's probably going to start World War III. We can't let her take power. I was literally like, I will take any Republican over Hillary Clinton right now. Now, so again, I was anti-Hillary, anti-feminist, all of this stuff. And come the summer of 2016, again, this is kind of how I was naive about Bernie Sanders and who he was. I was hoping and actually thought that Bernie Sanders was going to be a true like anti-establishment warrior and rebel against Hillary at the Democratic convention. Like I thought he was actually going to go and try to go rogue and try to steal delegates and all this stuff. And when he ended up just cucking and endorsing Hillary, I felt betrayed, extremely betrayed. I was like, how could you do that? How could you support Hillary Clinton? Okay. So I knew I was not going to follow Bernie on that train. I knew I was never Hillary. And that is kind of the point in my life where the influence of Trump and Trump supporters and Republicans came into my life. So back in 2016, back in middle school, I was not the biggest Trump supporter necessarily, And he may look at that cringe. Yeah, I get it. But also keep in mind this, okay? I grew up my parents were not political growing up, right? My dad now has become a Republican. Mom is still pretty apolitical. But, back then I didn't really have any parental influences. All I had was influences of like California and everything around me. And growing up, the idea of supporting Trump was so outlandish that it just, I wasn't buying into like the propaganda, but it just was not my first instinct. But I did genuinely prefer him over Hillary because I was like, at least he's anti-establishment. I'm sort of on this Bernie populist pipeline. And at least he's not the evil Illuminati witch antichrist that I thought Hillary Clinton was. That's who I thought she was. So I was like, whatever. If Trump wins, I'll be kind of happy. I'll laugh and stuff, and we'll work with the situation. But being anti-Hillary at the time actually started to make me like friendly with Trump supporters, because I often found myself teaming up with Trump supporters at school, the one Trump supporter at my school, which I'll tell you about in a second, but especially online and in comment sections. I was on the internet, I was fighting people and stuff like that. And I remember the one conservative kid at my middle school. It was this Armenian kid named Arthur. Okay, so shout out to Arthur. I know he watches some of my content today. So Arthur, if you're watching this, shout out. Good times. I remember those days. But he was just the stereotypical loudmouth, annoying, provocateur conservative kid. He was owning all the feminists and stuff on a daily basis. Total Chad, total king. Shout out to Arthur. But I remember being his friend. Right? I was friendly with Arthur. We used to actually team up a lot of times to roast Hillary. We would roast feminists. We would make fun of social justice and how like sensitive all the snowflakes were. Like we would team up and do this stuff together. Okay. And that was fun. And I also noticed in the process that like in many ways, the Trump supporters were just generally more pleasant people than the Hillary camp. The leftists, the feminists, they were all miserable, angry people. And like, on kind of like a personal social level, always found myself relating more to conservatives. I'm a dude. I used to play sports and stuff. Like it's just naturally, it never really seemed to fit on me. Okay. And so 2016 happens, Trump wins. I was actually shocked. I thought to myself, there's no way that the system will allow Trump to win. I was very shocked when that happened. But that happened. Again, I was kind of happy about it, right? I was sort of apathetic, but I was just like, okay, that's a decent outcome. But then I saw the reaction of the leftists and the Hillary Clinton supporters. You'll remember this, right? They were literally crying in the streets, screaming, just being completely just over dramatic, over the top, idiots about the entire situation. And, I found that kind of satisfying. But I also remember that in the back of my head. I was like, this is how ridiculous the people who share some of your beliefs are. Do you really want to be in this camp? I saw that reaction. I saw, remember the SJW crying in the streets, the whole Clinton camp crying. I was like, these people are ridiculous. Okay. So we graduate 8th grade and then go to high school. Okay. And honestly, my freshman year of high school, I took a step back from politics. I really stopped caring, if I'm gonna be honest. The only thing I cared about freshman year of high school was chasing girls, playing sports, and buying like hype beast outfits. That's really all I cared about. That's who I was. Okay. I was in the phase, I guess, in life where your testosterone starts to boost and your voice drops, and that's all you care about, right? Is girls and weights and whatnot. And so that was me. But if you'll remember, in about 2018, the Parkland shooting happened, and March for Our Lives as a result grew out of that. Now, at the time, I was genuinely scared of a school shooting, which I think is a reasonable belief. I think a lot of kids were at the time, because you had Parkland, you had Santa Fe, you had this whole like string of school shootings. But my first thought on that regard was like, I'm a natural survivalist. I kind of think like this. So I was like, thank gosh we have school police on campus, because if there's a shooter on campus, I want the cops to disarm the shooter, take out the shooter, whatever, right? And that's what I believed. I wanted the police to protect me. And then I heard these, remember David Hogg, remember the guy on the screen right there? I heard these March for Our Lives kids, instead of talking about school safety, they were out here screaming about gun control. And I even heard some talking about abolishing the police in school. And I was like, how does that make any sense? What are you guys even talking about? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And that's when I started to once again be interested in politics. And at that moment, I basically became an all-out right-winger, because the first guy I discovered who was kind of ridiculing all this type of stuff was Tucker Carlson. Okay. And it took about a few weeks of me listening to Tucker Carlson to immediately say, end of freshman year, I knew it. I knew it. I'm a conservative. Okay, I'm right wing. Trump is cool. The Trump economy was doing well. And that was another thing. I'm a logical guy. I'm a rational guy. And even back then, I was like hyper focused. I'm a logical guy. I was kind of a nerd. Like logical guy, rational guy. Everything I believe is rational. And so I looked at the state of the Trump economy and the way Trump's economy was booming. And I was like, well, how can I argue against that? People are doing well. Everyone's money's doing good. Like life is good. So Trump is a good guy, right? And so then I became passionate about politics again. And so to close this story here, how did I end up doing this stuff? Well, back in high school, I always wanted a way to voice my opinions. As you could imagine, I was surrounded by a lot of leftism on social media, obviously, and in class and stuff like that, all of that. And so I needed an outlet, you know what I mean? I needed a way to just get it all out. And, arguing online in like people's comment sections just was becoming to the point where it wasn't enough for me. And so at the time I was in a broadcast journalism class. Fun fact, I grew up, I used to want to be a news anchor. Okay. Vince Dao used to be wanted to be a news anchor on like ABC News and stuff like that. But then I just started to realize I have too many ideas. I'm too opinionated. I literally cannot control myself. Like I need to go out there and say my opinions. And so long story short, at the start of 10th grade, at 15 years old, I started my conservative Instagram page. That was about 4.5 years ago. And here we are now, okay? Obviously, I have matured and evolved a lot ideologically since then. I went through my libertarian phase. I went through like my populist phase. The movement and being involved in the movement ultimately is what I would attribute bringing me to Christ and bringing me to the gospel. But I would say overall that, I have remained right-wing throughout the course of the entire journey, and I doubt that'll ever change. I know who I am, right? So I might go through phases, I'm more libertarian, authoritarian, populist, whatever, but this whole time, like I've been conservative. I've only been surrounding myself largely with conservative people, not because I live in an echo chamber, but just because I just generally find a lot of the opponents to be, I love them, God bless them, but I personally find them a little bit insufferable just to be around on a daily basis. And that transcends politics. And so, yeah, since 15 years old, it has been my dream to do the conservative commentary thing professionally. I kid you not, that has not changed for a single second. Okay, every time the past 4.5 years, like I decided at a certain point, this is what I wanted to do, and that literally has not changed. Like I'm still at this point, I love it, and I want to do it as much as I did on day one, and so that's where we are today. So, yeah, and sometimes people ask. I don't think I'm necessarily the best well-spoken. I think I'm decent. But people are like, how are you so well-spoken for 19? Well, I don't know. God gave me a great gift. But I would also say at the same time, well, I've been doing it for 4 years, right? I've been doing it since I was 15 years old. And I've been in the game since I was like a baby. So, yeah, that's where we are today. So, yeah, ladies and gentlemen, now I hope you know me a little bit better. We will get into the news stories tonight and do like kind of the actual show. So don't go anywhere. But there is the origin story, chat. There's the Vince Dao origin story. And that's how I became redpilled. And that's how I became a conservative. And there's more to the story than that, but that's the condensed version. So there you go. There you have it. All right, let's pause here and check out some super chats before we continue onto the rest of the show. All right, let's check it out here. We got Jody Cha. She does not say anything, but she sends $5. Thank you very much for the $5. Jody Cha, appreciate the support. Sorry. I had a coffee earlier. I'm like, my acid's coming up. You know what I mean? Andrew M for Canadian $5 says, Christ is king. Stay based, my brother in Christ. So true. Christ is king. God bless you too, Andrew. Haven't seen you in chat in a while. Good to see you again. God bless you. And you stay based as well, my fellow brother in Christ. Easy Legendary for $5 says, Fic Nuentes now rejects the terms conservative and traditionalist and now calls himself a Christian futurist. Very based in my opinion, and I think we should follow. I don't know if the very based in my opinion thing is ironic or not, but futurism is just another term for progressivism. Okay, and what is their idea of Christian futurism? Dressing in trash bags, giving speeches like they're in Star Wars or something with like the screen behind them. I don't think we should follow. I think that the conservative movement, to an extent, I do understand that, yeah, you cannot LARP about the past. I understand those talking points. But what is the solution? To dress like Kanye and act like that? I don't think so. But thank you very much for the $5. Easy Legendary. Again, I don't know if that is sarcastic or not. But Will sends a member chat for 2 months, says, what is your opinion on theological liberalism? I don't think there can be such a thing as theological liberalism, right? Because that implicitly suggests that, like, the gospel, the thing about the term liberalism or progressivism, that the gospel changes over time, or it changes in significant ways, or in important ways, I should say. I'm not even going to put it like that. That it changes in general over time, which it doesn't, right? So I think naturally you have to be a theological, whether you want to call it conservative or textualist or originalist, right? I guess theological originalist maybe is a good way to put it. Naturally, you have to. There is no other way to properly apply scripture into your life, right? The word of God is the word of God. It was right when it was said. It does not need to change. Yes, we should understand it in context, but point being, it doesn't change in its nature. So thank you very much, Will Jockel. Zeb Boykin for $5 says, if Christian Futurist requires me to wear a trash bag to a suit and tie event, I'll pass. It's so true, Zeb. It's so true. Yeah, just looking ridiculous to promote the right. JD for $2. Thank you very much. God bless you. Says, are H-1B visas meant to be a pathway to citizenship? Very often, I believe they are. I'm not an expert on what that is to be the case, but if you're coming over on an H-1B visa, it's like a skilled work visa. So very often, yes, you have the money, you're going to have the resources to come over and eventually get your citizenship. So I don't know the exact ins and outs, but I would assume so, and that's what it would seem so to me. And we got Burgundy Blue for $20. Let's go. Thank you very much for the 20. Appreciate the support. God bless you. Huge super chat from Burgundy Blue. Says, hey Vince, congratulations on the new show. What do you think about leftists blaming deregulation during the Trump era for the collapse of Signature and Silicon Valley Bank? And what are your thoughts on deregulation in general? So I think the effect of that is largely minimized. You know what I mean? I don't think it's I saw a good thread on it, and we'll actually later this week we're going to interview the Noble Gold CEO, most likely, who can give you more insight on it. But no, I think you look at everything that's happened to the economy the past 2 years and wonder why everything has crashed. You know what I mean? If anything, one thing I'd probably attribute to is the fact that I believe in March 2020, because of the COVID and all that stuff, they let the federal government allowed banks to go off of fractional reserve banking. Fractional reserve is basically fractional reserve, which means, you can invest and do all this different stuff with a certain amount of customer deposits. If I'm not mistaken, actually, after March 2020, because of the, relief packages and all, they actually said that you could now just invest it wherever and whenever, and it was like total reserve, not fractional reserve. So maybe you could point it to that was a bipartisan thing, but I don't think the effect there is that strong of a correlation. Also, where's Biden the past 2 years to fix it? What are my thoughts on deregulation in general? I think deregulation is generally a good thing, but we should do it within reasonable bounds and do it for a purpose, right? I don't think using deregulation as an excuse to not go after big tech, not rein in corporate monopolization, all that stuff is a good thing. But I also think that, generally speaking, yes, America should be a country where it is easy to do business, right? That's what you want. That's what you need. So thank you very much for the $20, Burgundy Blue. Thank you very much for the super chats. We will move on with the news. Let's get into the news tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Again, thank you very much, all of you, for the support. God bless you. And again, if you want to support the show, keep the lights on here in the studio. Again, it's all appreciated, and it's all going to be a worthwhile investment on your part when this is one of the biggest shows on the American political right. You'll see. You're going to say, I'm glad I bet on Vince Dao. So true. Figuratively speaking, of course. But all right, with that said, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the news. We have a few stories for you. We obviously have a looming recession to talk about, but like I said, we'll probably be bringing the Noble Gold CEO, who's a lot smarter regarding banking and all that stuff than me, on the show later this week. So we'll actually hold off on that until then. We'll talk about it then. And maybe we can talk about it a little bit in the super chats too. But let's start off right now immediately by being controversial and pissing everyone off, which is, of course, a great way to start the first episode of your conservative political show. But this is a newsworthy event, okay? We got to talk about it. And that is the 2024 Republican primary. Of course, as we know, this is an issue that is in no way controversial. We will make 0 people mad whatsoever with this statement. Not a single person is going to be upset by this, right? Okay, but anyways, let's get into that. So the 24 Republican primary is heating up, and Donald Trump today launched a new attack video on his presumptive top opponent, Ron DeSantis. Let's check it out.
For those of you that didn't notice, Florida was doing great long before Ron DeSantis got there. People are fleeing from New York to Florida and other places because of high taxes and out-of-control crime. It's really bad. Not because of the governor. Thank you, Mr. President, for doing that. But it's not because of the governor. Florida was doing fantastically. You had a governor named Rick Scott who did a very good job. Even Charlie Crist, the Democrat, did a good job, and he had very good numbers. Sunshine and ocean are very alluring. It's not too hard to work with those factors. So just remember, Florida was doing really well long before Ron DeSantis got there.
So look, before we get into this, look, everyone's going to get mad. People are going to fight each other in the comments. I get it. Okay, keep it respectful. Keep it respectful, will we? But before we get into it, let me just kind of explain, I support Donald Trump. I like Donald Trump. I'm not an anti-Trumper by any stretch of the imagination. And I'll even go so far as to say that I do understand why, from a political perspective, Trump has to attack Ron DeSantis, right? None of us like to see our movement divided. None of us like to see 2 of the best politicians in our movement constantly fighting each other. But let's be realistic. This primary is obviously about to happen. I mean, you can say, oh, Ron DeSantis is not going to run for president. Really? Do you really believe? I mean, he was in Iowa this week. He's about to go to New Hampshire. Of course he's setting up to run for president, right? This primary is happening, and that's why these attacks are happening. So I understand why the mudflinging is going to happen and has to happen. And with that said, I do like Ron DeSantis too. Okay, I think he's a great governor. I think he's not just a great governor. I think the statewide movement he's starting with this kind of use of effective conservative power is probably one of the most important contributions any politician will make to the political right over the next few decades. And I'm serious about that. I think, decades from now, assuming we don't retake every aspect of the federal system, we may look back at DeSantis and say, well, thank gosh he started kind of setting the precedent of states rebelling and kind of in a figurative sense, of course, and kind of going against the grain of the federal government, because now we kind of have this model of the strong conservative state. And so, again, I don't hate Ron DeSantis either. Okay. And so what I'm about to say is out of love. Okay. For both politicians, I should say, not both candidates, but both politicians. But I will say that in all fairness, okay, and get mad if you want, from whatever side, but I don't think Donald Trump saying this is the most effective political attack against Ron DeSantis. Why? Because, Ron DeSantis is a good governor. He's a great governor, in fact. Not perfect, sure. There are places you could criticize him. But he is by far the best in the country and the most effective in the country. And to compare him remotely in the same stratosphere to Charlie Crist, to Rick Scott, I don't think that's accurate. I think it's reaching pretty hard to say he's not effective and that his highly effective culture war policies have not, fundamentally changed the state. Of course he's effective, and of course that has happened. And of course those policies are a big reason why the state's doing well economically and attracting so many people. Okay, and I came to this state because of his policies, not because of the sunshine. A lot of people do, right? There's a bunch of just Republicans just moving here from all over the country because it's seen as a paradise, okay? So with that said, Ron DeSantis, obviously, let's just be honest, Ron DeSantis is a good governor. He's popular among Republicans because of how good he is. And so I don't think the best political, and this is free advice to the Trump campaign again, but I don't think the best political attack against Ron DeSantis is to go out there and just say, he was a bad governor or he didn't really do anything to help the state of Florida. Of course he did. Right? Of course he did. Now, there are plenty of attacks that Trump could make against DeSantis that I think are quite valid. You could say, well, maybe he's a good governor, but it's still Trump's moment and it's not DeSantis's time yet. Maybe you could say DeSantis is like unproven on the federal level. Maybe he won't be as effective as a president as he is a governor. I think that's a reasonable take. You could even point to the number of times that he's caved to the state legislature, right? So very often what happens here in the state of Florida is DeSantis will introduce a bill that's very right-wing and very good, and then the rhino neocons in the state legislature will water it down, and DeSantis ends up caving and signing the watered-down bill, and then we get a half-baked version of what we wanted, right? And this is a totally, and again, Ron DeSantis still a great governor, but this is a valid criticism that if you're Donald Trump, you could bring up. You could say, well, if he can't take on the Florida neocons, how is he going to take on Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and all that stuff, right? You could even say, oh, well, he's doing important work in Florida, but he needs to stay where he is and finish the job, and Trump is the man to tackle the national issues. These are totally valid arguments that I think most Republicans, whether they support Trump or DeSantis, would say are generally more good faith. But in my humble opinion, I think what's not effective for Trump is to basically say that Ron DeSantis hasn't been a good governor and like his culture war policies have not been effective in all of this. Of course they have. I think you're really pushing up a very steep hill to convince people of to say, well, Florida was just the same under Rick Scott and Charlie Crist. Like, that's just not true. Okay, and we all know that's not true. Most Trump supporters don't think that's true. And nor do I think that this type of attack is necessary, right? Considering you look at the polls, Trump is the front runner, right? Maybe if he were late in the primaries, Trump is losing desperation time. You throw the Hail Mary and start saying this. But like I said, I think for now, the better attack is just to say, well, it's not your time yet. Get out of the way, little boy. You're a good governor, but we can work together. But I'm the one in charge here. It's my show, not your show, right? I think that's much better than just denying and downplaying all the very real and tangible changes that, admittedly, culture war speaking, Ron DeSantis has made to the state of Florida. So what are your guys' thoughts on that? Let me know in the chat. I'm sure this will not be controversial at all whatsoever. I'm sure everyone will be perfectly happy with each other and in perfect agreement on this issue. Yeah, very controversial. But yeah, let me know what you think in the chat and the comment section if you're watching on the replay. But let's pause for some super chats here. Let's check some of this out. DC Perspective. What's up, David? For $5, thank you very much. Says hyphenated Christianity is useless. You just need Christ, the Spirit, and the Church. So true, I agree. David Carlson, Easy Legendary for $5 says I have lecture, so I have to tune out. Lame. You're gonna learn more in here than school. Easy Legendary. Just kidding. Just kidding. Pay attention. Pay attention. Okay, but I'm glad to have stopped by for a little. Good night, and God bless you all. Good night to you, Easy, and God bless you too. The R. His name is just The R, says, great start. Keep it up. God bless to you and everyone. Thank you very much, The R, for the $10. Appreciate the chat very much. DC Perspective for $2 says, buy the Vince Dao dip. Thank you very much, DC Perspective. And Ultros, what the? Ultros is becoming a Vince Dao nationalist. Thank you very much for buying the membership. Ultros, shout out to you. Shout out to David R. Easy and all of our super chatters tonight. Again, if you want to support the show, super chatting is the best way to do so. All right, well, on here with our next story. So Lauren Boebert, who is one of the more solid Republicans in Congress. But recently, Congresswoman Lauren Boebert announced that she is going to be a grandmother, which, good for her. That's a beautiful thing. Life is a beautiful thing. But because of that, the left is now attacking her, and attacking her very viciously, I should add. Now, in fairness and in context to them, there is a little bit more to the story than that. Good faith, okay, yes, there is more to the story than that. As this liberal tweet points out, hey, I'm a good faith guy after all. Okay, Colorado is 17. Lauren Boebert is bragging about her 17-year-old son getting a 15-year-old pregnant and that she will be a 36-year-old grandmother. Before you continue bragging, Lauren, better make sure that there are no arrests coming. Gosh, she's pathetic and the hypocrisy is unreal. That tweet has 20,000 likes, by the way. But I would say that the only thing pathetic here is your degree of sheer misery. I mean, what miserable and unhappy people these people are. Look, okay, I know this offends you. I know this is a very controversial statement to say to a leftist, but the truth is that all life is beautiful. That's the truth. All life is beautiful. All life is created in the image of God, and that child, regardless of the circumstances that child was conceived in, that child is a blessing from God. Now, do we like teen pregnancy? No. Do we like, having kids out of wedlock, out of marriage? No, obviously not. But it is what it is. It happened. Okay, they made a mistake, sure, right? It's not a good thing for them to do, but it happened. You can't take back moves on the chessboard. You can only move forward, right? And so whether she likes it or not, whether she wants to be or not, Lauren Boebert is now a grandma, okay? So what do you expect her to do? What is the morally correct thing to do with that news? She can either still celebrate her grandchild as a blessing from God. She could support her son and help him in raising this new grandkid of theirs. Or she can what? Disown her son? Leave her grandkid to starve? Demand an abortion? What do you want her to do? What is she supposed to do other than say, this is beautiful, life is beautiful, this is a gift from God, I'm going to be a grandmother? What do you want her to say? And, she says, as you can see, all pro-lifers are hypocrites. Well, what's hypocritical? They're not getting an abortion. They're committing to having the baby, okay? And you guys always say, oh, well, you guys are only pro-life until the womb, and then outside of the womb, you're not pro-life. Well, here she is, committing to helping out her son and being supportive and helping out here, celebrating life. And you attack her for what? For not disowning her son? Not throwing a 17-year-old under the bus for making a, admittedly dumb life mistake? Come on, people. Let me say it again, okay? Controversial statement, I know. All life is a blessing from God that is to be celebrated. And I even had to argue this with some right-wingers. You had some people coming after me saying oh, well, he's having a kid out of wedlock. That's degenerate, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it is. I agree. I wasn't saying it's not, okay? But what I'm saying, I'm not saying that it's a good thing that, they fornicated and having this, whatnot, right? That's not what we're celebrating. But again, I will reiterate, you can't take back actions. You can only go forward in life, okay? So you can stand there and attack people, but they can't go backwards. And the current situation is this teenage girl is pregnant. So what are we going to do about it? She can either leave her kid and her grandkid to starve or out to dry and fend for themselves, or she can help them and celebrate the blessing that God has bestowed on the Boebert family. What do you want them to do? And I don't expect the left to get this because they don't care about life, right? And so to them, what is a teenage pregnancy? Well, it's an inconvenience. They're in high school, all that stuff. So screw the life, disregard the life. But come on, guys, I expect better from right-wingers. We shouldn't have to debate this. You know what I mean? Shout out here, though, to Jennifer Melton for sticking up for me here in the comment section. These folks are morons. We teach our kids that having kids out of wedlock is bad. Yes, absolutely correct. It is bad. But if it happens, we will support them. The funny thing is, if we didn't offer support, these people would be vilifying us. Also true. They'd say, oh, well, you're only pro-life inside the womb. All these people do is constantly pivot on issues. And it's so true. Again, I don't think this should be hard to understand. I think a fourth grader could understand the level of nuance here. Yes, having kids out of wedlock is bad. Yes, you know what I mean? That stuff should be done in the context of marriage. But if it happens, we still love our kids and we love life as pro-lifers, okay? Again, I don't think this is hard to understand. I think people are just being completely contrarian about this and being willfully disingenuous, okay? Willfully disingenuous. All right, so apparently to the left, being a grandmother and having a genetic legacy is not empowering. But you know what is? You know what is empowering? Showing your boobs to random men. We have this headline out of Germany per CNN, okay? Woman in Berlin can now swim topless in the city's public pools if they choose to. It is being hailed as a step forward for gender equality in the German capital. Patriarchy-owned epic style, am I right? Oh no, women can go topless in public. What will sexist, dirty, misogynistic men ever do now? I'm sure they're seething at this right now. At the prospect of seeing topless women in public. I'm sure, you know, the carnal, terrible men are just, they can't believe it. So look, as men, obviously men will, you know, naturally look at that stuff, you know? Men's eyes are drawn to it, okay? So if you're a woman who has that out, obviously men, and I'm not saying, you know, the lust is a good thing, obviously, but this is our biology, right? Men will look at that and they're going to look and they're going to enjoy it. And so believe it or not, feminists, okay, again, mind-boggling, but believe it or not, those pigs of men that you think you just epically owned, many of them are actually quite happy with this decision, okay? That's just the truth. I saw people even saying like, oh, I'm booking a flight to Germany now. Like, really? Yeah, great job, guys. You really destroyed the patriarchy. You really owned the male race on that one. But let me push back from a personal perspective and say something relatively pro-woman that your father clearly never told you, which is that your intimate parts do not belong for the world to see. They are not for the entire world and the entire public to see. Frankly, there are about 4 people on earth who should see your boobs, okay? You, yourself, obviously, your man, your husband, your babies, obviously, and like your doctors when it's necessary, okay? That's really about it. And again, let me be clear. I don't say that on behalf of the patriarchy. I don't say that on behalf of men, because again, a lot of men want to see that. You think they're mad that like, oh, women are now topless in public? I'm looking out, believe it or not, okay, I'm such a sexist, I'm a misogynist. I'm looking out for you. I'm looking out for your well-being and the state of your soul, okay? That's what we're doing here. It is, even if men enjoy it, which they do, again, you're not owning the patriarchy by doing this, but it is indecent. It is shameful to God. It is bad for your soul. There's no need to do it, okay? Immodesty is not empowering. Freeing the nipple, you may be freeing the nipple, but you're imprisoning the mind and the soul. Do you know why modesty standards exist, people? Why we have this social standard, or at least used to have this social standard of being modest? I know the feminists think that, you know, it's like evil, sexist men trying to hold them down, but that's actually not the truth, okay? Because actually, as a matter of fact, men naturally, we want to see it all, okay? That's like our biological driven instinct as straight men, okay? No, modesty standards exist to protect and glorify the beauty of women, okay? Yes, your body is beautiful, which is why it should be something that is protected and private and intimate, not hoed out to the whole world, not put on display for the whole world to see, Susan. So yeah, shame on you, Germany. We hate to see it. And again, we don't hate to see it because, oh, the patriarchy, right? Nor do we hate to see it because, folks, again, it's indecent and it's bad for the soul, okay? That's the only reason. All right, ladies and gentlemen, well, that wraps up our news stories for the night. We will go to Q&A and chat interaction now for how long we've been streaming. We'll go for about 10 minutes and then we'll call it a night. So what's up, guys? How are we all doing? How'd you like the show? Let me go through the super chats and whatnot here. Let's check them out. Let's see. We got Zachary Marintet. By the way, we're at 196 likes. Let's get to 200 likes right now, okay? But Zachary Marintet says Trump's criticism is a flop, but I need DeSantis to retract his hawkish policy for my support. Well, that's a valid criticism, Zachary, right? Like I said, I think there are valid criticisms to be made of DeSantis, and I think it's absolutely a valid thing to bring up. Well, look at his foreign policy record in Congress. What are your thoughts on that now? And so, you know, if you're Donald Trump, I think that is something that is valid and probably a good idea to attack him on. But you're right. I agree. I think the criticism there that just, oh, he's not a good governor. He's as good of governor as Charlie Crist. Come on, no, that's just not true. Thank you for the $5, Zachary. God bless you. Dollar for another $5. So he sends in $2.5 for dollars. Says, money for nothing and your chicks for free. Dire Straits are the biggest chads in rock history, especially Mark Knopfler, all-time great guitarist. I don't know a lot of Dire Straits music, but thank you very much for the $5, dollar for dollar. What songs do Dire Straits make? Not even sure. I used to like AC/DC growing up and like Def Leppard and stuff. Never really got into Dire Straits. Thank you very much for the $5 though. God bless you. And Zach sends another $5. Says, man, why is it those people are getting people pregnant, screwing around while I'm still getting ghosted from every girl I ask out? Okay, listen, Zachary. Listen. All right. First of all, I mean, look at Lauren Boebert's son, okay? You know, the guy, sharp chin, all that. Like, I can see why it happens that way. But for the rest of us, for people who, you know, are like 5 out of 10s like myself, like probably you, Zach, you just gotta learn. You just gotta adapt, and you gotta improve your Riz, Zach, okay? We'll do a private training course on how to improve the Riz, Zach. But thank you very much for the $5. I'm not going to say keep at it, because clearly what you're doing is not working, but I would say keep trying to, you know, be better at it. You know what I mean? There are probably things about yourself that you could improve, and there are probably, you know, things about your approach and your Riz if you could improve as well. But thank you very much for the $5, Zach. Best of luck to you, man. You'll figure it out. Okay? Listen, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. It's so true. It's so true. Burgundy Blue for $20 says the stream is turning out great, and this is my new favorite show on YouTube. Also, what role do you think the government should have on the economy, like healthcare, protectionism, organization, workers' unions, and welfare? Thank you very much for the $20, Burgundy Blue. Big donation there, and I appreciate it. Again, we will be here the plan is every night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, some people said I should move it to 7 p.m. because that's when Tim Pool streams, which maybe at some point I'll think about doing that. The issue right now is like this show takes time to produce, to put together, right? Because I got to put together the assets, right? I got to put all the, you know, this stuff on the screen, and then I gotta like plan it out, get the stories together, get it all prepped, do the marketing, all of that. And so it really is like an all-day process right now that takes me until 8 p.m. But if I can like work on eventually as I get better at it, more used to it, maybe we can push it back to 7. I don't know. But to answer your question, healthcare. You know, I think healthcare should be left to like market competition, in the sense that, I don't know. I think the government, perhaps in a nationalistic sense, there's a case to be made, should provide some type of bottom line guarantee of healthcare, maybe, right? Like, I don't know. We already have a lot of like Medicaid, Medicare stuff, whatever. But I think the fundamental problem right now in the healthcare sector isn't really that. I think it's, for the most part, that it's overly regulated and monopolized, right? And, you know, Obamacare and some of the stuff like Clinton did and stuff back then, that's actually contributed a lot to the reason why healthcare is so expensive. And so, you know, I don't really have an overarching answer on that one. You know, it's a pragmatist. We kind of work with the position we are in. But I would say currently, if I were to diagnose a problem in the American healthcare sector, I think we have the worst of both worlds. Because if it was all subsidized, then we could have like Medicare for all. But we also don't really have a market system. It's so mixed that we're getting the worst of both worlds, because it's not free, and it's also not efficient, and this and that. And so that definitely needs fixing. Protectionism. I'm a protectionist for sure. I believe in tariffs. I believe in keeping our manufacturing here at home. Organization. I don't know. What does that mean, organization? Workers, unions. I don't know. I used to be a lot more pro-unions. I'm more kind of in the position now where it's like, that's just up to the workers and if they want to do that. I don't think public unions should be a thing. You look at teachers' unions, even like police unions. Most public unions are useless, and I really don't think should be a thing. I don't think they're ethical either. I think they're kind of like a violation of the taxpayer usage of money when you think about it. Welfare, I think I'm generally of the opinion that welfare should be left to the community and the church. For sure, I would definitely say that the welfare system constructed by FDR, LBJ, total disaster. And so I'd get rid of that. And, if the government wants to maybe help do things like promote families and stuff like that, then, we can discuss that. But I think generally we need to normalize the precedent much more of these being local church issues, community issues, state issues, things like that. But thank you very much for the $20, Burgundy Blue. Big support here. And we're going to end the stream in about 5 minutes, okay? We're going to cut the stream off in about 5 or so minutes. I don't want these streams to go over an hour. Although maybe every Friday night we can do like a longer stream where we interact with the chat for longer, but I want to like keep it under an hour for the aesthetic purposes. So, any last chats you have, thoughts, feel free to send them in. Feel free to send in super chats. We're at 210 likes. Let's get that up, folks. Let's get up to 230. Can we get 230? Let's get up to that. King Kairos for the 5, what is that, euros? Are those euros? Says, howdy, Vince. Despite being secular at the moment, I will attend a 40 Days for Life campaign on 2 days for the pro-life cause. Have you ever signed up to do 40 Days for Life? I have not. I'll have to go and check that out for sure. Thank you very much for the 5. I believe that's euros, right? Am I stupid or is that euros? I'm pretty sure it is. But thank you very much, King Kairos. I appreciate it. And I have not. I'll have to go and check that out. Appreciate the support. I agree. Welfare opinion is a disaster. So true. What is your opinion on Marco Rubio? Marco Rubio is obviously like a pushover and not the strongest. But, it's very interesting. He's actually, when you look at his record, he's actually one of the better Republicans in the Senate on like hardcore conservative issues. Which, that's not a praise of Marco Rubio. But I think that actually puts in perspective how bad the Senate GOP is, that he's one of the best, right? And obviously because Marco was a big op of Trump in 2016, obviously, he has that image. But you actually look at his record. Like I said, criticisms to be made, but he actually is one of our better senators, which, again, maybe says more about the Senate GOP than it does. But thank you very much for the chats. Vince, will California legalize topless girls next? Probably. Would you ever move back to California if it got better? I mean, maybe, but it'd have to get a lot better in the sense that not just the politics, not just like, the taxes, which obviously, so we get rid of like half of the taxes. We'd still have to address the issue of it being like way too overcrowded, right? The state's just crowded. And then how's it going to get better? It's so crowded. The property market sucks because of that and all that. And so in theory, I would consider it, although I like Eastern time. Let's think about this professionally too. I live in Eastern time. The show business media turns on Eastern time. So that would suck. The media market out there for conservative stuff is moving eastward from California. And like I said, even if you fix all the policies, it's still expensive. It's still crowded. So I don't know. Most likely not, but it would be a consideration. I know this is irrelevant, but do you listen to K-pop? No. I don't listen to K-pop because for the same reason I was like anti-feminist or whatever growing up. The very annoying girls back then used to all listen to K-pop, and so I never did it. I never got into it. This is simply the truth. All right. Well, let's see here. Last super chat here from Dollar for Dollar, unless anyone wants to send a very last minute one. Dollar for $10 says we should have incentives for people who have families. Like if you raise 5 kids, the government can pay off the family's mortgage. If we can afford to send the money to Ukraine, then we can do this. I agree with you 100%. I agree. But it's also like, could the federal government in its current state ever successfully or realistically implement that? No. You know what I mean? So, yes, it is something we should pursue over time, but I think we fundamentally would have to change the welfare state and change like the state of the bureaucracy in order to get that done. And so I'm not opposed to the idea, but I've become such a realist on just the federal system and how broken and stuck it is that it's just like, we take what we can get, right? Ollie for 10 euros here says, are our best interests, thank you very much for the support tonight, by the way, guys, are our best interests served by fighting Russians via proxy, thus keeping them at bay, or is it better just focus on ourselves, even though that might allow our enemies to go stronger? I think the best thing we should be pursuing is peace, right? I think we should just try to broker a peace deal between those two. And so, no, I don't think our best interests are served via fighting the Russians by proxy. And honestly, it's probably a few decades too late for this, but if I were in charge of American policy, I would have probably years ago tried to say, Russia's not really the enemy. If China's the real enemy, then we should actually try to kind of do the reverse Nixon strategy and pull Russia away from China. Right. So that's what I would say. But thank you very much for the 10 euros. I wish I could talk about. Well, OK, we've already gone over an hour. Dang it. Dang it. I was trying to get the under hour mark. So I'll give a few more like last thoughts here. You know, it is true. We do need to focus on ourselves, and we need to. Also, we don't have a clearly defined goal in Ukraine at all. I mean, what's the goal? Because it's not realistic to say drive Russia totally out of Ukrainian territory. Of course, they're going to get something. Now, I think we ought to just accept the realistic outcome, which is, so Russia's failed to take Kiev, whatever, take the whole country. And so we really need to just look at it and say, well, okay, if that's the case, then, you know, what's clearly going to happen is Russia's going to get some territory. They're probably going to keep Crimea. They're not going to take the whole country. You and I both know that's how this war is going to end. So we can either step in now and say, you know, hey, Ukraine, broker a peace treaty. We're done giving you all this money. Let's just do that. Or, you know, we can just be stuck here funding a proxy war forever and getting a bunch of people killed with the same exact outcome. So that's what I would say on that front. Zeb for $5 says we have to disband NATO, or at a minimum stop expanding. This is true. NATO is a very outdated institution, right? You say, oh, it's for fighting. It was the Western Bloc of nations, right? And the Soviet Union is gone. The Cold War is over. What's the actual functional, logical point of NATO? There is none. No one can define what it's for. And it keeps expanding. Now we have Turkey in NATO. Okay, they added Turkey to it, if I'm not mistaken, and all these countries. They're talking about adding Nigeria. And it's like, these are countries in very volatile parts of the world that have historically been wrapped up in all these different ethnic conflicts and whatnot. And remember, the basic premise of NATO is mutual defense. That means if someone nukes a NATO country or attacks a NATO country, it is America's treaty obligation to step in and intervene and fight the war in defense of those NATO countries. And so the expansion of NATO, as you're seeing Turkey, Nigeria, all this stuff, it's just setting up the world for disaster. I mean, what do you think is going to happen? Very obvious what's going to happen, right? Like we have to they're talking about Nigeria. We have to step in and defend Nigeria, right? And think about like Ukraine in terms of Russia, right? They were talking for years about adding Ukraine to NATO. And that's actually a big part of what kind of, arguably you could say that is part of what drove this war to happen in the first place, was that sort of conflict over adding them to NATO and the fear on the Russians' end of that happening. And think about that. So then any territorial dispute that Russia has with Crimea or Ukraine, it is our moral obligation to end that in nuclear war. It's ridiculous. And so I agree. Anti-NATO, it's outdated, etc. And if not to disband, at least stop expanding it. I 100% agree. Thank you very much, Zeb Boykin. Thank you very much for all the super chats tonight. Great stream, great first start to the show. Let me know what you guys thought of the show in the comments below. And again, we will be here every night this week at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Be sure to join us tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday for the new episodes of the Vince Dao Show. But that'll do it here for us tonight. So until I next see you guys, have a very good night, get a good night's rest. Alpha moves only. God bless and peace.